Okay, cool. All right, well, so might as well get started. So I'm Russ Rimmerman. As Greg mentioned, I work for Microsoft. Been with Microsoft for a little over 12 years. Was in oil and gas IT before that. And I've worked on Config Manager or SECM, SMS, whatever you want to call it, since around 2003. And actually finally just offloaded my last Config Manager assignment a couple weeks ago. And so now I am fully devoted to all things Power Platform. So made a bit of a technology shift. So I was a PFE for, as many of you know, PFE, CE, customer engineer. Now we're actually becoming CSAs, Cloud Solution Architects. And if you haven't heard that, and I actually took a CSA position before they announced that, so they kind of watered down my my job change a little bit. But I'm excited to see how that ends up. So first off, if anybody has any questions throughout this, feel free to ask. I've got a few slides. I don't want to PowerPoint death by PowerPoint anyone. I'm going to do mostly demos and show you things in my lab. So the first topic is going to be integrating the Microsoft Power Platform to SCCM admin service. And I do know Adam and I forgot the other gentleman's name, who was
Sean.
Sean, thank you. Sean and Adam actually watched that video, and it was kind of entertaining to see that they were struggling. And then somebody shared my blog post, and that was pretty flattering. But I have about 2019, I had an internal challenge at Microsoft to set up like an event registration system globally, so that people could register and attend events, find out where they are, and things like that. And I started off using forms, Microsoft Forms. Quickly outgrew it about a day later, and talked to some people and said, "How do I solve this problem?" And they said, Power Apps. And I had never heard of Power Apps before, and I started digging into it. Long story short, I fell in love, and here I am today working on Power Apps, our Power Platform in general. So of course, the first thing I thought was, well, let me use some of my existing knowledge with SCCM and see what I can do to bridge some of the gaps, close some of the feature gaps that I know that customers have and that I've seen, and come up with some ideas to make some Power Apps. So, so why Power Platform? Well, there's many different things you can do with Power Platform. For example, custom admin console, as Adam showed last meeting in May. That was one of my first attempts of learning Power Platform. I also had to create a custom connector for that so I could tie into the admin services OData backend, and also to have automation to close feature gaps. One of the other things I blogged about was doing, taking Config Manager app approvals, which are very basic, as many of you know. They just, you just put in an email address, and it always sends every request to that email address. And I made a Power Automate flow that takes that all those incoming emails, figures out who the user is requesting them and what application it is, looks up their manager and forwards the request onto their manager, which of course that link in that approval email is good. As long as you got that email, you can approve it. So forwarded the email to the manager, and that was pretty cool, taking that app approval to the next level. Another reason is just because you can, right? So Power Apps and Power Platform are, I must say, very habit forming, and I'm finding myself wanting to work in it more and more as I'm becoming more fluent with it. I know Adam said he kind of was pulling his hair out trying to figure it out during the last meeting, and I have to admit I was the same way for about 3 months. The first 3 months I was completely lost. But ultimately, at the end of the day, if you've done any kind of Excel functions, sum and concat and count and things like that. It's not a whole lot different. There really is very low code. I wouldn't say it's no code by any means. I think that's a marketing thing, but the low code, absolutely. I'm not a developer by nature. I do know some PowerShell. I'm pretty PowerShell fluent. Used to do WinBatch in the day, if any of you remember that. But I do not know any C#, anything, .NET, you name it. So I've really enjoyed being able to make apps that I see a need for. So the data flow for Power Platform communicating with the admin service is the Power Platform, which of course is in the Microsoft Cloud. You have to get Azure AD authentication, which then once you have that token request, you can then communicate through the Cloud Management Gateway, assuming you have that implemented. And then from there, hit the admin service, which is running on your SMS provider. So the requirements to make all this work, of course, CMG or Cloud Management Gateway is one of the first things. Now, many of you are familiar with the URL that you use for co-management to push out clients. And it has a CCM_mutual auth URL or sub URL in it. And that is not the correct URL to use for external access to the admin service. So the best way to get that URL is this SQL query that I have in this slide. And that will give you your exact URL to use for communicating the endpoint for all endpoint communications from the cloud to your CMG, whether that's Power Apps, whether it's Power Automate, API tools like Postman or what have you. The next thing to do is, of course, go into your SMS provider properties and enable the checkbox that says allow access to the admin service over Cloud Management Gateway. That one checkbox will, if you miss it, will throw you through a loop. That is exactly what says allow CMG to be connected over the admin service to be usable over the internet. The next thing is Azure AD application registration. So you just go into the Azure portal. If you're not familiar with that, you can go to Enterprise Applications or App Registrations and create a new Azure AD application. You have to put in, some permissions. So you have to tell it what permissions you want to allow, which for the admin service, you have to allow impersonation, which of course will allow the communications to impersonate any user with their credentials. So all RBAC permissions are honored when you're using a Power App because you are authenticating as your account. And then, of course, admin consent. So anytime you add a Azure AD app registration and add permissions that require admin consent, you have to do the admin consent. So if you're not a global admin, you'll have to work with your global admin to facilitate that, or somebody with the proper permissions. And then the next thing is you can, of course, create a Power Platform custom connector, which is usable by both Power Apps and Power Automate. Or you can just make Power Automate workflows handle everything. If you don't want to have a Power App communicating directly to your admin service, you can just have flows kicking those things off. So this is just a quick view. I know Adam showed it in your last meeting, and this is what that console I made looks like. Any request that's available via the admin service is available to Power Apps or Power Automate. So I say that because not as many of you are probably aware, not everything is available or exposed by the admin service today. I wish that wasn't the case. I wish everything was possible via the admin service, and I know they're really prioritizing things that they're surfacing on the endpoint management admin center. so that those things work, and then everything else might be kind of extra credit. But I'm hopeful, and I know there's some internal work being done on, standardizing documentation and API documentation and all that the folks working on that didn't have to worry about initially, and now they're having to. So I do know that there's been new features added over time, and I'm hoping that continues. And of course, the nice thing about making a Power Apps or Power Automate app is you can also integrate not just with the admin service, but you can integrate with anything, any other API like Graph for Teams, for Azure AD, Intune, what have you. So you'll see in my app that I actually am talking to the admin service, but I'm getting a BitLocker key from Azure AD. So those co-managed machines that are managed by, have BitLocker managed by Intune, you can still get the encryption key. This is actually a recent thing that somebody asked me for. They said, we have help desk folks or desktop support folks, and they often need to make a computer unknown. And a lot of you are probably familiar with that. Somebody's always coming and bothering you saying, hey, can you delete this out of SCCM, or give me access so I can delete it because I need this machine to be unknown because it's not running my task sequence that's deployed to unknown computers. So it's an age-old problem. I'm very, very familiar with it myself. And I said, well, yeah, we could probably make an app do that. It sounds pretty easy. So I just basically made, and I'll be able to show you this once they get out of these slides, but made a Power App that you can paste in machine names or list of machine names. The app triggers this Power Automate flow that you see here, appends the computer names to a text file, which is actually on the primary or CAS site server. And there's a PowerShell script running on that site server that is monitoring that text file. And as soon as that text file is changed, that PowerShell script reads the text file, kicks off another PowerShell script that just gets the CM client and deletes CM client. So it's literally that's all it took to take a very simple Power App with a very simple paste of machine names to deleting clients in the console. So it's amazingly, when you think about these things, it becomes really complicated because you got to worry about role-based access control, and they're going to see all these things in the config manager console that they won't have access to, and it's confusing and too much. Just make a little app that has nothing but a little button that says paste clients and delete, and problem solved. One of the really old projects that I did when I first got into Power Apps was making a automatic deployment rule approval app. And I think I did this in 2019, but the use case here was that, everybody's using ADRs, but they're really worried about, they want to review what updates are going to get deployed before they actually get deployed, right? So, a lot of people were manually kicking off their ADRs, or they weren't using ADRs at all because it's kind of scary having an automatic thing happen without, you forget about it and oops, it just deployed updates. So, so I made this, and basically how it works is every time a status message that for the automatic deployment rule running occurs, created a status filter rule that basically runs a PowerShell script, because you can have any status message kick off a script, a bat file, PowerShell, what have you. And that script basically goes and triggers a Power Automate workflow that takes all the updates that were synchronized, puts them into, you can put them into Dataverse, you can put them in their SharePoint list, you can put them into a Excel file on OneDrive if you like, but wherever you want, you store those updates. And then the admins would get an email and can scroll through the app and look at the updates and click on the links and read, what does this update do, and read more about it. It also shows the max runtime of the updates, when the update's going to start deploying and the deadline. And you just hit the little green plunger that says accept, and I had fun with buttons. That's one of the things I like about Power Apps is I get to download cool buttons and put them in my apps. And so you push that accept plunger, and it enables the deployment. So the ADR, when you create it, there's that first checkbox that says enable this deployment after the ADRs run. And so I said, well, that's easy enough. I just uncheck that. So you end up with a disabled deployment that ADR is handling everything but making the deployment disabled. So when you hit that green accept button, it's literally going in and enabling that deployment. That's all it does. Now you may wonder, well, how is it getting from cloud to on-prem? Because that's not even using the admin service, for example. And so there's a thing called a Power Platform Gateway. There's the Power Apps Gateway, Power BI Gateway, Power Automate Gateway. And there it really is only one install for all Power Platform. And what that gateway does is it allows you to access on-premise resources, whether that's SQL, whether that's a text file, appending or reading a text file, whether that's an on-premise SharePoint, anything on-premise that you want to access, you install that gateway, and you can granularly allow and connections to different things like SQL servers and text files sitting on the drive. So the Power Automate flow is actually also appending to this text file, which is triggering this PowerShell script, just like my client deleter. So if you think about that, you can, the possibilities are endless. If you can PowerShell it, you can make it run, whether you're doing PowerShell run script through the admin service or whether you're have a PowerShell script indefinitely running on your primary, looking for this file to be modified and taking off with it and running with it. There's just a ton you can do. So with that, I'm gonna show some of these things. I know slides are a little boring. And if anybody has any questions while I'm getting this going, feel free to let me know. And I'm gonna hopefully not flip around too much, and ignore the little red X's all over. So this is the Power Apps canvas, or the Power Apps Studio. And if you haven't seen it, it's very much like, I feel like in a way Visual Studio, except way less options, because Visual Studio just confuses me greatly with all the different menus and choices. But it's just with Power Apps, it's really as simple as starting out with just like a button, right? So you do insert button, and you've got a button, and you can drop it anywhere. Now all these are buttons, and so the next thing to do is to tell the buttons what you want to do, right? So if I click on devices, this is basically all the code that I use to go get all the devices via the admin service. Now these update contexts, these are just variables. It's just like setting a environment variable temporarily on a screen. And I do that for having the little loading spinner and telling it that I'm either viewing devices or I'm viewing collections. So that, for example, if I click on collections, I don't have to go to a new screen. I can use the same screen to see devices versus collections, because I'm literally making things visible and invisible based on what I'm clicking on, and using a single screen to do that. So now you might be saying, well, so just that's all the code? Well, not necessarily. So I had to, in order, and this is kind of where Adam during the last call was kind of like, oh, aha moment. I started off creating Power Automate flows for everything that I was doing, and it got very time consuming. I was having to copy the login to get a token from Azure AD over and over. I was having to copy those flows multiple times. I ended up with 20 flows just to do 20 things, and it was overwhelming. So I said, there's got to be a better way. And so I finally figured out the better way is to just make a custom connector. And so that you might think, well, that sounds like coding development. Well, no, it's not at all. So if you go to Power Apps, you have this object or this menu item here called Custom Connectors. And you start out on this, it starts you out on this General tab. Excuse me. And so the first thing you do is you put in your, I gotta get a drink of water. I just swallowed some water down my windpipe. I love when I do that. So you put in your Cloud Management Gateway host name there. And then the rest of the URL that you got from that SQL query into the base URL. So that's the first screen. Now, in this case, because it's going over the internet, over the CMG, it's not connecting via on-premise data gateway. That is the thing that I was talking about earlier, that if you want to connect to on-premise SQL, on-premise files, share, whatever, that's the data gateway. But in this case, it's coming in through CMG. So the next screen you go to is security. It's, of course, OAuth 2.0, Azure Active Directory. And so that is, everything that leverages Azure AD for authentication, you just pick that for the identity provider. Now, the next thing, of course, I was very confused the first time I saw this and said, what is a client ID? What is a client secret? I don't even know what to put in these blanks. And over time, as you get more familiar with Azure, you start learning these lingos and learn that Microsoft calls them different things depending on what document you're reading. Sometimes it's a client ID, sometimes it's an app ID, right? So you got to start pairing those terminologies together. And a client secret, an tenant ID, resource URL, right? So all these things. Now, if you go to the Azure portal, this is the application, the Azure AD application I created. So if I go, to do that, you literally just go into Azure Active Directory, and there's really enterprise applications and app registrations are very similar, but they give you different options depending on what you need. You can see the apps from either one. So if I click on app registrations, I can see CMG via admin service. If I click on enterprise applications, I can see, where is it? CMG, somewhere in here. Let me sort. CMG via admin service, exact same application, exact same GUIDs, and here is application ID, aka client ID. So this is that GUID that you would paste into this client ID blank, and you just over time, like I said, learn that client ID equals application ID. I don't know why we do that, but and then if you go into the app registrations view of the application, that's where most of what you need is. So you can go to certificates and secrets, and this is where you create a client secret. A client secret, you create it, you only get one chance to get it, and you can never see it again. So I can't even view this secret. If I forgot what it is, I would have to just go create another by clicking on new client secret. And I obviously probably did that at one point, so I have two secrets. And those are just like when you set up CMG, you have to create those Azure services, and those go and create Azure AD apps, and those create secrets, and that's stored in an encrypted fashion in your SQL database and so forth. So you're just doing the same thing that Config Manager is doing when it's creating this stuff, but you're doing it manually. And then on API permissions, you have to tell it what kind of permissions. So for the admin service, the only thing you need is this user impersonation, and and give it a description. It's delegated. Now, delegated means that it'll run as the user, whereas application type permissions means that it runs as a service principal or a just kind of like a service account, not a real user. So this is saying, hey, let whatever users launching or communicating to this app, let it impersonate their account. And so when you create an app, user.read is always there in Microsoft Graph, so you don't even have to add that one. But this is literally it. You just add user underscore impersonation. And so then you have, when you're done, you have your app slash, and here it even says app client ID. You've got your client ID. You've got your tenant ID, which you don't actually have to put in, but you can. Then the other one was resource URL, and that is this application ID URI. That can be anything. You could put in, Bob's Burgers in there. It doesn't matter as long as you put whatever you put in there, right? In this in here in this application ID URI, you just have to make sure you put it into resource URL. And then when you save this connector, it's going to give you this exact redirect URL. This is the same regardless if you're customer A, customer B. Everybody gets this same URL when you save this, and you take that redirect URL and you go into, let me see where it's at. I'm trying to remember redirect URL. I forgot where that one is, so I'm going to have to think here for a second. Right here, right where it says redirect URL. So, and so you paste the redirect URL in here, just like that. You take that, and that basically makes it so that it'll redirect any calls back to the Power Apps or Power Platform connector. And so you literally paste that into your redirect URI, and that's it for this screen. Now, that's probably the hardest part, in my opinion, because after that, the fun starts, and you get to actually start figuring out what you want to do. So there's a list under definition. You get to define all your actions. So I did get devices, which gets all devices, or get device, get collections, what have you. Now, all this is documented on the admin service, different admin service blogs. You can also look when you run the Endpoint Management Admin Center. You can watch the admin service, and it will tell you what calls it's making. But ultimately, you're going to see URLs going by like /admin service /v1.0 /device, and then a device ID for get device. Get devices just ends in /device with no specific device ID. Get collections ends in /collections. These are all those things that you see in the admin service when you call the admin service and you say /metadata. It gives you the full list of all the things you can do. That's where you find out these, or you look on Adam's blog, or you look on other blogs and figure out, hey, it's collections, or you try it on the Endpoint Management Admin Console and watch your admin service log, and you'll get that exact suffix of the URL to put in here. And then if you can do filters, so you can say, of the collections, I only want the collection ID, and I only want the refresh time. I don't want all 50 properties because that just wastes time, and I don't need it all for my app. So you can also include what's called OData filters. And that's just $filter. And then what you do then is you take and get a response, and I'll show you actually. So I mentioned tools. One of the tools that I really use heavily for figuring out how this works and making sure that it works is called Postman. It's free. It's a free download, and so you can literally do things like get a token, right? So this one call right here gets a token. I hit send, and here's my token. Now that I've got a token, I can go and say, list get devices, and this one has a dollar select equals. So I'm specifically picking certain column or certain bits of information. And so if I hit send, I just used that token and I'm seeing my resource ID, the computer name, is the machine online, is it a client, what site code is it active? All these things that you're familiar with seeing in the Config Manager admin console are now coming from the admin service over CMG to either Postman in this case, or to your custom connector. And of course, if you take off the filter, the OData filters, and you run it, you get everything. You get all these, properties, endpoint protection, antivirus, pending restarts, you name it, and for every single key or for every single client. And this is, of course, all in JSON. I'm sure you've all heard of JSON. It's not as scary as it looks once you get used to it. But what you do is you make that exact, call just like you want it. You get all the properties that you want, and you take that get command, copy it to your clipboard, and then you literally just go in here and say new action right here. And so if I didn't have get devices, I would say, get devices 2 or something, because I already have one, and get devices 2. And you literally take the request, which is this URL here, import, and it's a get, and you paste it in, and you hit import, and it's going to complain because it's conflicting with get device. So it's smart enough to know that I already have that one. And then when you take your response, which is down in this section of Postman, you copy it to clipboard. You go add a default response, and you paste that into the body. And what that'll do is it'll dynamically figure out, okay, this is a string, this is a Boolean, this is a numeric integer, and it will add all of those properties, and it's not going to let me because it's smart enough to know I've already got this one, but it'll add all those properties to the response. And then once you have that, then you can go, and now it's mad at me for making a duplicate. Let me just pretend I made this one. So go get devices. This is what the response looks like. So it shows all of the properties that you selected in your filter, or your this one it's showing because I have $select. So I told it only show these properties. So it included all of them and their data type. I didn't have to do anything. And then you go to test and test it. And basically, this one's get device. Let me test get devices. So you just hit test operation and you get your response. So this is exactly what I got in Postman. Here's all my properties and what have you. So I know that it's working. So then the next step is, of course, you get some of you go through, you do all your actions you want to do, everything you want to do, and go into your Power App, and you just go over here and click on Add Data and Connectors, and I now have this custom connector called Admin Service that I created. So of course this doesn't come out of the box. Microsoft hasn't made one. I've considered publishing or submitting this as a community connector, just haven't yet. I did upload actually the JSON for it yesterday because I saw that Adam checked my GitHub out and didn't find it. So that is out there now. But so once you connect that connector, now the app is smart enough to know, hey, admin service, which is the name of the connector, .get devices, and it knows what to do because I put in that URL. And I tell it, hey, I want the machine ID, I want the name, I want the CNO is online. So I could take just those 3 properties, go back to my test, I could put those in here and test, and look, I only get those 3 properties. So, this is how you test your custom connector. If any of you are into development, you may be familiar with Swagger. I'd never heard of it, and I thought it was kind of a funny thing, Swagger. Walk with Swagger. But if you like to see what's going on as you're building these things, it's doing all this work for you. It's automatically making, like, here is let's see, here's get distribution jobs, all the different things that you're putting in. It's automatically building all of this, and you can see this is SMSG system boot summary, so I can get boot times and all that stuff. But again, you don't, this is pretty scary looking, but you don't even have to really even look at that. You just come in here, paste your request, paste your response, update connector, go into your Power App and try it. And so if I hit get devices, if I hit play and I click get devices, it literally goes and just gets the devices, and they were already there. So then the next thing I said was, well, cool, let me show all this data here. Let me try some client activities like running scripts and things like that, looking at co-management workloads, looking at, hey, can I get the BitLocker key? So that's coming from Azure AD. That's actually making a graph call. If I click this X and I click on get BitLocker key, you can see that it's doing a graph connector.list BitLocker recovery key. What is graph connector? That's another custom connector that I made. And all I had to do was go look at the docs and say, okay, how do I get a BitLocker key? I just do get BitLocker recovery keys. So, it's always graph.microsoft.com/ blah, blah, blah. And you just take this URL. You can also use Graph Explorer if you're familiar with that. If Postman is too intimidating, you don't have to use Postman. You can use Graph Explorer, which is also free and publicly available. So you can do, put all these things in. I figured out, okay, this is how to list all the scripts. So if I look at my config manager console and I go to software library scripts, you can see I have all these scripts that I've made over the years. And if you look at my scripts in the in this list, it's all the same scripts. So as soon as you know how to do a list scripts via admin service, you've got a list of all the scripts in a drop-down menu, and you can tell it to run. And of course, if I tell it to run, it's going to run another command, which actually it's going to pop up a dialog and say, are you sure you want to do it? And if I click on OK, let me format text, it's going to do an admin service.run script on the selected ID, which is this resource or resource ID 1677351, which is this client that I'm looking at, and selected script GUID, which is the script GUID that I selected in this menu. So, and if you look here, this is literally just saying sort and list all my scripts. If I select something, or if I change the menu, selected script GUID to drop down to, which is and it is the best practice to name your drop downs and combo boxes in a meaningful way. But by default, they're all named drop down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is drop down to .selected .script GUID. So that's setting a variable selected script GUID, and this run button is using that, or this OK button is using that to call, when it calls the admin service run script. So it's that's all the code that was involved in that, and that was all the effort involved in that. It was a lot of work up front figuring out how to do it all, especially I'd never used APIs. I'd never used Postman. I barely, thanks to Adam, I kind of got familiar with the admin service. because I really hadn't even done much with that either. It was just this, thing out there that I needed to look into. Now, a cool thing is, and Adam said it was a bot. He called it a chat bot in the last meeting. But actually, and that's Nicole Wagner with her cool mask. So I thought, well, wouldn't that be cool if I could not only see who's logged on here, current users logged on, but I could actually chat with them from here. So I clicked on that and I thought, well, let me look up, oops, and that BitLocker key is overlapping. So this is as easy as it is, send backward again. Okay, well, let me bring this one forward. Let me bring it to front. There we go. Okay. Oh, now I lost their picture. Anyway, there is layering, just like your favorite paint program and things like that. So then I thought, well, that'd be cool. I can see our presence, and that's talking to Graph Teams to get the presence. And I can hit chat, and I can say, oh, there's that BitLocker key again. I can say, hey, Anna, or Nicole. I used to call her Anna. Hey, Nicole, what's up? Send. And I think this BitLocker key is now, oh, no, there it goes. So it's sent. Now, if I go to this, oh, there it is. So I didn't even have Teams installed on that machine. Or if I did, I didn't use it. So I literally just sent that message to her, and she can say, not much, Russ. And it comes back to the app. And so you can say, hey, end user, I need you to reboot, or, hey, I see an issue on your machine or whatever. And I think it should show up here. And of course, you can click on here and it'll send an email or whatever you want to do. So that is that. Now there's also, wait, there's more. I've done a little, there's some ugly screens that I have, like the application editor. This is talking to Intune, so I can click and shows all my Intune apps, and I can come in here and change what categories they're assigned to, or what Azure AD group they're assigned to or deployed to. I can see some of the other things I did. I created there's a collection. Oh, that's an old one. There is status message details. So this one, I actually got a little help because, again, I'm not a developer, but I uploaded the status message DLL up to an Azure service, an Azure function, and used some of the PowerShell code that's out there. In fact, Adam even has it out on his blog to convert status messages into plain English. And I made a pretty cool status message viewer. So I can look at all my status messages. I can say, well, I only want to see audits. So now I can see that, this person modified this component. And you may notice that it's a heck of a lot faster than the status message viewer. Trying to look through status messages and find a status message is very painful. And I know that because I've worked on Config Manager for years. Or I can type in, I want to see what's going on my software update point. So I can say, oh, there's a warning, my catalog, whatever, or failed to synchronize the patch my PC updates. So all these things that you can't do in the console, it's very easy once you learn, a little bit of Power Apps. I can filter by, the components, the severity, view, 1,500, 3,000, how many days, what have you. All that's once you figure out what call to make, which of course you do, like status messages is in here, right here. So it's just the CMG URL, and it's WMI and SMS stat message within strings. So, and then you can filter based on the time, that you want to view, and what have you. I started doing a little bit with looking up licenses. I'm trying to think what else is in here. Any questions on any of this so far? I know it kind of went long there.
I've got one for you, Russ. This is helpful, and I think this is really great to see the art of the possible. A couple of things, and I don't know if you have any pointers on where to learn more, but I've played around with getting data, but how I bind it and show it in, like for example, the table you have here and things like that. Are you aware of any tutorials, or you just poke around and learn, or that's where I need to spend more time to figure out, I guess.
Yeah, so to be honest, I watched numerous YouTube videos. I think it probably was the primary source that I learned from. There's 2 or 3 MVPs that are blogging almost daily on Power Platform. But ultimately, you just learn the concepts, just like Config Manager has collections, Power Apps has collections too. So, to go get all those devices and put them into a collection is called clear collect. Clear collect will clear the collection first and then populate it. If you just do collect, it'll append. It'll just keep adding things to the collection. So there's terminology that you're used to hearing, like in SCCM as collections. You got to realize that, hey, other products use collections, and that's just how it is. But the cool thing is once you build that collection, right, which is putting all those results into a collection, you can go view collections and look at the results, or look at what the collection ended up looking like. For example, all devices, you can see it'll always show you the first 5. Because it doesn't want to waste resources just for viewing. But you'll see the first 5 devices in here, and you can see what data you got back, and make sure it's what you wanted. Now, one of the hardest things that I started struggling with was I always would get a collection, and it would actually show up inside. Or it would show up, the data would show up as a table inside a collection. And that just got me really confused for a long time. And I realized that, hey, the results and the table was named value. Well, if you just dot value at the end of that parentheses, it's going to drill into all those results. So, those kind of things, like I said, and in fact, I'll show you real quick. There's, so I just think, what was that? That collection was called, I already forgot. All devices, yeah. So if we go look now at all devices, right here, this is what I'm talking about. So look, you say, whoa, that's weird. I don't want that. And what is this value? And you click on value, and boom, there's all my information. So I quickly learned that, okay, to get inside of .value, I just need to, wherever I took it off here, dot. And when you hit dot, just like PowerShell ISE or Visual Studio, it gives you the hints down here. It says this is what your options are. And so just click .value, and now I hit devices again, and that collection is here. So now how do I display it in here? Well, on any, in Power Apps, there's a concept of galleries. This is a gallery. Anytime you want to display a whole bunch of values, you just go insert gallery, and you can do it vertical, horizontal, with pictures, without pictures. And you end up with, let me do a new screen here. So you do insert gallery, you could do blank vertical. And then what's the name of your collection? Mine was called all devices. So all devices will show up as a data source because I created that collection. And so if I just use search, all devices is a collection. I hit all devices. Now I say, okay, I still don't see any data. You look over here at layout, it says blank. Oh, okay. Well, how about I do title, subtitle, and body? It's going to randomly pick the first few things in there, which one of them is an Azure AD device ID. One is the AD site name. One is the client active status, which is blank. And so you could say, well, I don't want that. So you just come in here to fields and say, well, I want this one to be the name of the machine, and this one to be the domain name, and this one to be the client cert type. Or no, that didn't have anything. Last DDR. So so there's the start of your gallery. And then you say, well, I want more than 3 things. So all you do is you copy, paste, and then you come up here, and every single one of these things is going to show up as a dot value because it's in your collection. So you just go this item dot, and now I've got all these things. I can do the site name, the client version, all the things that I had in my $select are here. So I can say, well, I want to see MAC address, and MAC address isn't there. Some of mine are busted, but and so, in a gallery is this, everything is referred to as this item. So it's basically dynamic. This is one item. This is another item. This is another item. Let's do AD site name. So you can just keep listing things, and then to, move it around, you can do this. And the cool thing about galleries is you don't have to edit every single row. You just go, okay, I want this over here. I want this over here, like that, put it up here. And now I hit play, and here's all my machines. So, I mean, it's that easy. Once you get the call, the admin service call, you create your custom connector and you test it, connect it to the Power App. You're able to start making those calls.
Okay. Yeah,
Hopefully
that's pretty handy. It's those little pieces, I think, that I need to learn how to tie together. But yeah, nice.
Yeah, like I said, there's a couple guys that I watch. They're very, very good. One is Reza Dorani. He makes a new Power Apps video just about daily. And another one is Shane Young, and he's pretty entertaining. A lot more entertaining than Reza, but they're both pretty entertaining. Shane's he's amusing if you like to watch amusing people. And they've got everything, right? So you search on collections, search on variables, drop downs, combo boxes, whatever you want, because all those things are available in here. If you want to drop down, you just click drop down. And now it's like, okay, it starts with 1, 2, 3. Well, what if I want to make it have my all devices in it? Now I've got that, but that's the Azure AD device ID. Maybe I just want to make it the client name. So now I have a drop down with every single client in my site, right? So that's literally that. It is pretty low code, but it is something that, like I said, took me, a good 3 months. And I was still doing SCCM, so I had to kind of do a little bit in my free time. But just to learn those things like clear collect and set for setting a variable, they're all, the Power Apps, the documentation is pretty good. You can look, all the functions are in there. Every function like clear collect, for example, and examples of how to do it. So you can even clear a collection or clear and collect. And so you just put in, and it gives you some examples. This is just hard coding values in the collection. But you could also have a SharePoint list called ice cream and do a clear collect ice cream, and it's going to take all the values from that list and populate it into your collection. But all those functions are right here, are formulas and functions. So just like Excel, a lot of them are the same, setting the color, concatenate, count. date, all those kind of things are all documented very well.
That's nice. Thanks.
Yeah. Looks like I'm out of time on my first one. Any other questions on that one?